In the summer of 1940, Britain stood alone against the Nazi war machine. The beaches of Dunkirk had witnessed a miracle of evacuation, but also a catastrophe of abandonment. Over 2,000 artillery pieces, 65,000 vehicles, and nearly all the heavy equipment of the British Expeditionary Force lay scattered across the French coast, now in enemy hands. The British Army had escaped with their lives, but they had left behind the tools of modern warfare. And now, as the threat of German invasion loomed across the English Channel, Britain faced a terrifying question. How could soldiers without anti-tank weapons stop Hitler's panzers? The answer would come in one of the most unusual and controversial weapons ever devised in the desperation of war. Its official designation was Grenade No. 74, but history would know it by a far more memorable name, the sticky bomb. This is the story of a weapon born from crisis, designed in haste, feared by those who carried it, and yet remembered as an iconic symbol of British ingenuity and determination in the darkest days of the Second World War. The situation facing Britain in the summer of 1940 was nothing short of catastrophic. Operation Dynamo had rescued over 300,000 Allied troops from the beaches of Dunkirk, but the British Expeditionary Force had been forced to abandon virtually all its heavy equipment. The army that returned to Britain was an army in name only. They had rifles, they had determination, but against German armoured divisions they had precious little else. Intelligence reports indicated that the Wehrmacht possessed over 2,000 tanks. Britain's ability to resist a ground invasion was quite simply inadequate. Prime Minister Winston Churchill understood the gravity of the situation. In his famous speeches he promised to fight on the beaches, on the landing grounds, in the fields and in the streets. But with what weapons would this fighting be done? The factories of Britain were working at maximum capacity, but producing sufficient numbers of conventional anti-tank guns would take months, perhaps years. Something else was needed, something that could be manufactured quickly, distributed widely, and used by ordinary soldiers with minimal training. The British military establishment began searching for emergency solutions, and it was in this atmosphere of crisis that the concept of the sticky bomb was born. The mind behind this unusual weapon belonged to a military research department known as MD1, or Ministry of Defence 1, an experimental weapons division that operated with remarkable freedom and creativity. MD1 was led by Lieutenant Colonel Millis Jeffress, a brilliant and unconventional officer who had already distinguished himself in developing experimental explosives. Jeffress and his team were given a simple brief: develop weapons that could stop tanks using materials readily available and methods that ordinary infantry could employ. What they created would become one of the war's most infamous devices. The concept was audacious in its simplicity. Since Britain lacked sophisticated anti-tank rockets or missiles, why not create a hand-delivered explosive charge that would stick to the surface of enemy tanks? The idea drew inspiration from earlier experimental adhesives, but the execution would prove far more complex than the concept. The challenge was not merely creating an explosive device, but developing an adhesive that would work under battlefield conditions, stick to dirty or wet metal surfaces, arm itself safely, and be simple enough for soldiers under extreme stress to deploy effectively. The result was a weapon that looked like nothing else in the British arsenal. The sticky bomb's construction was both ingenious and alarming. At its core was a glass sphere, approximately 4 inches in diameter, filled with approximately 1¼ pounds of nitroglycerin-based explosive. This glass sphere was then covered entirely with a stockinette fabric that had been impregnated with an extremely sticky adhesive compound. The entire assembly was encased in 2 metal hemispheres that screwed together, protecting the sticky surface until the moment of use. A simple 5-second time fuse was attached to the top, initiated by removing a safety pin and releasing a lever, much like a conventional hand grenade. The total weight was approximately 2¼ pounds, making it heavy and awkward to carry and throw. But it was the adhesive that made this weapon unique, and uniquely problematic. The compound developed for the sticky bomb was based on a mixture of natural rubber, rosin, and other proprietary ingredients that created an extraordinarily tacky surface. When the protective metal casing was removed, the stockinette-covered sphere became so adhesive that it would stick to virtually anything it touched. Tank armour certainly, but also uniforms, weapons, vegetation, and the hands of the soldier attempting to deploy it. This adhesive quality, the very feature that gave the weapon its name and its theoretical effectiveness, would also become its greatest liability. The official instructions for using the sticky bomb read like something from a particularly dark comedy. The soldier was to approach the enemy tank, remove the safety pin, pull off the two metal hemispheres to expose the sticky surface, and then hurl the device at the tank's hull or tracks where it would adhere. Upon impact, the glass sphere would break, activating the fuse, giving the soldier 5 seconds to take cover before the explosive detonated. In theory, the weapon could be used by any infantryman, turning every soldier into a potential tank killer. In practice, the reality was far different and far more dangerous. Training exercises with the sticky bomb revealed problems almost immediately. The adhesive was so powerful that soldiers frequently found the device sticking to their own hands, uniforms, or equipment. There are documented cases of soldiers unable to release the bomb after pulling the pin, resulting in frantic attempts to shake it free while the 5-second fuse burned down. The glass construction meant the weapon was fragile, and rough handling during the chaos of combat could easily break the sphere prematurely, potentially detonating the explosive in the carrier's hands or pack. The weight and awkward shape made accurate throwing difficult, especially for soldiers already burdened with other equipment. Furthermore, the tactical requirements for using the sticky bomb were extraordinarily demanding. Unlike a rifle or even a conventional grenade that could be employed from cover, the sticky bomb required the soldier to approach within throwing distance of an enemy tank, which typically meant within 10 to 15 yards. Tanks in 1940 and beyond rarely operated alone. They were supported by infantry, machine guns, and other vehicles. The idea that a soldier could simply run up to a moving tank, stick a bomb to it, and escape unharmed was, in most combat situations, entirely unrealistic. Yet this was precisely what the weapon demanded. The danger was not theoretical. During training exercises in Britain, there were numerous accidents involving the sticky bomb. Soldiers were injured when the devices detonated prematurely, or when the adhesive caused the bomb to stick to unintended targets. In at least one documented incident, a sticky bomb adhered to a training instructor's uniform after a demonstration, and only frantic work by his colleagues prevented a tragedy. The weapon quickly gained a sinister reputation among the troops who were expected to carry it. Many soldiers viewed the sticky bomb not as a weapon against the enemy, but as a danger to themselves. Despite these problems, production of the sticky bomb proceeded rapidly. Over 2.5 million units were manufactured between 1940 and 1943. They were distributed not only to regular army units, but also to the Home Guard, the civilian defence force that would form Britain's last line of defence in the event of invasion. Training films were produced showing idealised scenarios of brave soldiers successfully employing the weapon against Nazi tanks. Posters encouraged confidence in this new tool, but among those who actually handled the sticky bomb, confidence remained elusive. The question that haunted military planners was simple: would the sticky bomb actually work in combat? Controlled tests against stationary tanks showed that the explosive charge could damage tracks, wheels, and thinner armour plates, though it was generally insufficient to penetrate the main hull armour of medium or heavy tanks. But controlled tests bore little resemblance to actual combat conditions. What would happen when soldiers, terrified and under fire, attempted to use this unwieldy and dangerous weapon against moving tanks crewed by determined enemies? The answer would come from the scattered battlefields where British forces found themselves fighting for survival. The sticky bomb saw limited but documented use in several theatres of war. In North Africa, British and Commonwealth forces occasionally employed the weapon during the chaotic desert campaigns of 1941 and 1942. Reports from these engagements are fragmentary, but they suggest that the sticky bomb was most effective not against moving tanks in open battle, but against stationary or disabled vehicles, and in close quarters fighting around defensive positions. The vast open spaces of the desert, where tanks could maneuver freely and maintain distance from infantry, were hardly ideal conditions for a weapon that required close approach. More successful employment came in the dense terrain of Southeast Asia, particularly during the Burma campaign. In jungle warfare, where visibility was limited and tanks often became separated from their supporting infantry, the sticky bomb found a more practical application. There are accounts of British and Indian Army units using the weapon against Japanese tanks in situations where the thick vegetation allowed soldiers to approach more closely. The Type 95 Heigo and other light Japanese tanks with their thinner armour were more vulnerable to the sticky bomb's charge than their heavier German counterparts. Perhaps the most extensive combat use of the sticky bomb came during the defence of British colonial possessions in the Pacific and during the early phases of the war in Europe. When Axis forces attacked, often the defenders had little else available. The weapon was issued to garrison forces, commando units, and resistance fighters. There are records of sticky bombs being supplied to partisan groups in occupied Europe, where they were sometimes used in sabotage operations against parked vehicles and fuel depots, applications far removed from the original anti-tank purpose, but potentially more effective given the circumstances. However, it must be stated clearly that the sticky bomb never became a significant factor in any major battle. It did not stop German panzer divisions, it did not defeat Italian armour in North Africa, and it did not turn the tide in any campaign. Its psychological impact on German forces was negligible. Its practical military value was severely limited by its inherent design flaws and the extraordinary danger it posed to its users. By 1943, as better anti-tank weapons became available, including the American bazooka and the British Piat projector, the sticky bomb was quietly phased out of frontline service. Production ceased, and existing stocks were either consumed in training or disposed of. Yet the story of the sticky bomb is about far more than its limited combat effectiveness. It represents a crucial moment in British history, a time when the nation faced existential threat and responded with whatever tools it could devise. The weapon emerged from desperation, from the terrifying weeks after Dunkirk when invasion seemed imminent and the British Army stood virtually defenceless against German armour. In that context, even a dangerous and imperfect weapon seemed better than no weapon at all. The sticky bomb gave soldiers something to fight with, and perhaps more importantly, it gave the British people a symbol that their military was not surrendering to circumstances. The legacy of the sticky bomb extends beyond military history into the realm of cultural memory. It has appeared in countless films, novels, and television programmes about the Second World War, often portrayed with a mixture of admiration for British ingenuity and dark humour about its dangerous quirks. Veterans who trained with the weapon recalled it with a combination of respect and terror, acknowledging both the bravery required to carry such a device and the relief they felt when they never had to use it in actual combat. The sticky bomb became emblematic of a certain kind of improvised make-do spirit that characterised Britain during the war years. Modern military historians assess the sticky bomb with more critical eyes. While acknowledging the desperate circumstances that led to its creation, most experts conclude that it represented a poor use of limited resources. The money, materials, and industrial capacity devoted to producing millions of sticky bombs might have been better spent accelerating production of conventional anti-tank weapons that were both more effective and safer for their users. The weapon's design, while clever in concept, ignored fundamental realities of combat psychology and battlefield dynamics. Asking soldiers to approach enemy tanks closely enough to attach an explosive device was unrealistic in most combat situations, and the danger posed by the weapon's adhesive and fragile construction made it nearly as hazardous to friendly forces as to the enemy. Yet there is something undeniably compelling about the sticky bomb story. It speaks to the extraordinary pressures of total war, when nations mobilize every aspect of their societies and accept risks that would be unthinkable in peacetime. The young scientists and engineers who developed the weapon were working against impossible deadlines, trying to solve problems that had never been solved before, knowing that failure might mean the difference between national survival and Nazi occupation. The soldiers who carried the sticky bomb into training exercises, and occasionally into combat, demonstrated courage of a peculiar kind. Not just the courage to face the enemy, but the courage to carry a weapon that they knew might kill them through accident or design flaw. The sticky bomb also illustrates the gap that often exists between theoretical weapons development and battlefield reality. On paper, in controlled laboratory conditions, the concept seemed sound. An adhesive explosive that could be mass-produced and widely distributed, democratizing anti-tank warfare and giving every infantryman the capability to destroy armoured vehicles. But war is not fought in laboratories. It is fought by frightened, exhausted men under conditions of chaos, confusion, and mortal danger. The elegant theoretical solution became, in practice, a clumsy, dangerous device that few soldiers wanted to carry, and fewer still wanted to use. As the Second World War progressed, and Allied industrial production reached full capacity, the desperate improvisations of 1940 gave way to purpose-designed weapon systems. Anti-tank rifles, rocket launchers, and increasingly powerful artillery pieces provided infantry with effective means of engaging enemy armour. The sticky bomb, along with other emergency weapons like the Northover projector and the Blacker bombard, faded into obsolescence. By the war's end, many soldiers had never even seen a sticky bomb, let alone used one. The weapon became a curiosity, a footnote, a symbol of a particular moment in history when Britain stood alone and armed itself with whatever tools desperation could devise. Today, surviving examples of the sticky bomb can be found in military museums across Britain and the Commonwealth. They sit in display cases, their stockinette covering long dried out, their adhesive properties vanished with time, their explosive charges long since removed. Museum visitors look at these odd glass spheres and wonder at the strange ingenuity and terrible necessity that created them. Military historians study the documents surrounding their development, manufacturing and deployment, piecing together the story of a weapon that never quite worked as intended, but remains fascinating precisely because of its flaws. The sticky bomb reminds us that military history is not simply a chronicle of decisive battles and brilliant strategies. It is also a story of human beings responding to extraordinary circumstances with the tools and knowledge available to them. The weapon represents both the best and worst of wartime innovation, the creative thinking and rapid development that emerge from crisis, but also the acceptance of inadequate solutions because no better options existed. It stands as testament to the courage of soldiers who carried dangerous weapons because their country asked them to, and to the ingenuity of engineers who designed imperfect solutions because perfect ones could not be created in time. In the final analysis, the sticky bomb was a weapon of its moment. That moment was the summer of 1940, when German armies stood poised across the Channel, when invasion seemed imminent, and when Britain had few options and little time. The weapon emerged from desperation, served a psychological purpose more than a military one, and disappeared when circumstances changed. It never won a battle, never destroyed a significant number of enemy tanks, and never fulfilled the hopes of its creators. Yet it remains one of the most memorable weapons of the Second World War, not because of what it accomplished, but because of what it represented: a nation's refusal to surrender, even when armed with nothing more than sticky glass spheres filled with explosives and coated with determination. The story of the sticky bomb is, ultimately, a human story. It is about the scientists working through the night to develop something, anything, that might stop German tanks. It is about the factory workers who manufactured millions of these devices, handling nitroglycerin and adhesive compounds with little protection and less thanks. It is about the soldiers who trained with these dangerous weapons, knowing they might be called upon to run toward enemy armour with nothing but a sticky sphere and 5 seconds of burning fuse. And it is about a nation that, in its darkest hour, chose to fight with whatever weapons it could create, no matter how imperfect, no matter how dangerous, because the alternative was unthinkable. The British sticky bomb, grenade number 74, remains a peculiar monument to that spirit: ingenious, dangerous, desperate, and ultimately iconic. It did not win the war, but it symbolises something essential about those who fought it: the willingness to face impossible odds with imperfect tools and unshakable determination. In the long history of warfare, there have been many more effective weapons, but few more memorable than the strange glass sphere covered in sticky fabric that Britain's soldiers carried during the nation's most desperate hour.